Hello and welcome to Cyber Focus, your source for international business information. My name is Tim Smith and our guest today is Dr. David Audretsch. Dr. Audretsch is a distinguished professor and the American Chair of Economic Development at Indiana University, where he also serves as director of the Institute for Development Strategies. His research has focused on the links between entrepreneurship, government policy, innovation, economic development, and global competitiveness. Dr. Audretsch is also the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Small Business Economics and Entrepreneurship Journal, and recently co-authored the book, The 7 Secrets of Germany. Today, Dr. Audretsch will share his insights with us on the economic landscape of Germany and the state of diversity and youth entrepreneurship. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Tim, for this very kind invitation. It's great to be with you.
Great, thanks. Well, to begin with, what are some of the most important factors driving Germany's economic success? How has Germany transitioned from the sick man of Europe to the largest economic power in Europe?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tim. And if you go back less than a generation ago, you mentioned the sick man of Europe. That came from the headlines of an issue of The Economist, the magazine The Economist. I think it was 1999. And Germany was, its economic performance was dismal. Growth was stagnant, unemployment was ratcheting higher into double digits. They just didn't seem to have any perspective. Their GDP per capita fell below France and was getting perilously close to Italy. What they were able to do in the last, since about a decade ago, about, I'd say 13, starting about 2004, these transformation processes are gradual. They're not just one sudden event, but was to really change the country. So now everybody knows. It's one thing, it's not a secret, that Germany's the high economic performer, not just in Europe, but possibly in all of the West, kind of the envy of the world. How have they done it? Really, two words can be an answer. But the two words are words that nobody would have associated with Germany back when they were the sick man of Europe: entrepreneurship and innovation.
So maybe as a follow-up question, David, when you think about entrepreneurship and innovation, what does that look like to young Germans as opposed to what it looks like to young people here in the U.S.?
That's a great question. Back when they were the sick man of Europe, it looked invisible, like it was something that you couldn't put in the same sentence with Germany. There was a famous quote by he was a leading member of the Green Party, Joschka Fischer. He later on went on to be the foreign minister, what we call the Secretary of State, under Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder. And he said, it was about 97, 98, he said, if Bill Gates were German, there'd be no Microsoft. Really saying you can't have entrepreneurship in Germany. What's happened since then, if you fast forward today, Berlin, which is just one city in Germany, you know, the capital city, by almost anybody's measure, is the most entrepreneurial place in Europe. It's full of startups, it's full of internet startups, high-tech startups, full of entrepreneurial behavior. But I would say, in kind of what your question's getting at, there is something that's different. They have kind of that American Silicon Valley kind. That's when we think of entrepreneurship, we think of Silicon Valley, and then the rest of us, including out here in Indiana, we're trying to catch up fast. Well, like the rest of us, they've got that element where they try to get the high tech, the internet, the type of high growth, innovative startups. But they've also got something that's uniquely German. They call it Mittelstand, which are small companies that have been around for generations in some cases. They're in manufacturing. And they're very successful in manufacturing, which is a different kind of entrepreneurship than we see in this country. So I would say it occurs to me studying this, it's not that Silicon Valley is not entrepreneurial, but we've been so enamored with the Silicon Valley model of entrepreneurship, we've kind of been blinded to other varieties of entrepreneurship like they have in Germany. And that's what breeds success in manufacturing.
Okay, thank you. In your book, you and your co-author outline the 7 characteristics of contemporary Germany that have led to its economic turnaround. In one of them, laptops and lederhosen, you state that Germany's economy is built on the cornerstones of flexibility and diversity. How does this factor play into Germany's migration situation and its aging population?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tim. Again, it's that probably more than any other chapter, that one is startling. Well, there's another chapter too that's startling to somebody looking at the titles, because the stereotype or the conventional thinking about Germany is they're successful, but they're rigid. And this chapter really challenges that assumption. And the lederhosen is the traditional values, traditional ways of doing things. They've been able to hang on to that. But of course, the laptops really shows an openness to going into, leading into the future, and is a kind of flexibility. I think it's a pragmatism that puts performance, a very high value on performance, economic performance. So when you link that then to diversity and immigration, the Germany I got to know when I went there the first time in 1985, it was still called Deutschland, as it's called today, and it made sense to me. Land of the Deutsch, land of the Germans. It was really a country of homogeneity. Of course, there were foreigners like myself, but you could feel this was a country of Germans, Germans first, and the rest of us. There was a sense of we were guests in a foreign country. We were referred to that. You fast forward to today, and the country is generally very aggressively welcoming to all kinds of different people, all kinds of different backgrounds. Of course, they want them to contribute to the performance, but they also give them the tools, the training, the education to contribute. Now, one reason may be, and you kind of allude to this, why this is true. In our country, my retirement is really based, in the retirement of my generation, is based on the stock market. We all have our retirement funds. For them, their retirements are not based in equities in the stock market. They're going to come from tax revenues. They need population. Partly because of that diminishing population, they need people coming in, a next generation that's going to work. That's one big reason, is simply due to the low population growth of the Germans. But I'd also say it's a little bit more complicated. What they learned back during that dismal period of the sick man of Europe, when they looked across the Atlantic, they saw a diverse, heterogeneous America, realized that's a key to innovation, to thinking outside the box, to coming up with new ideas, and they realized diversity leads to successful performance, and they never forgot that lesson.
Fascinating. Thank you, David. How has the German culture shaped entrepreneurship within the country, and what is the state of youth entrepreneurship now?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It used to be entrepreneurship. I think the Germans have had a very ambivalent relationship with entrepreneurship, because to some degree, entrepreneurship means going your own way, following a different path, and that is not something that's been compatible with the German culture and German values. But as I say, they learned largely from the American success of the 1990s. Entrepreneurship drives success. Now, one thing we academics know about entrepreneurship, the way we define it's a little bit funny to a broader audience. That is, it's about searching for or discovering opportunities and then getting the tools you need, the capabilities to deliver on those opportunities. That's what the Germans have done. So when the crisis hit, back the financial crisis a decade ago, what we felt like in this country is, oh, the opportunities have dried up, we need stimulus. It was all about stimulus debate.
Certainly.
Over in that country, they had the same crisis, but they realized the opportunities were there, but they weren't in the country. what they learned was they got to look out in the world. They got to look to China. They got to look to North America. Got to look to the rest of Europe. They became very outward looking. They had to learn foreign languages, principally English. They had to learn to feel comfortable and successful in different cultures. So they went to Japan, they went to China, they went to Brazil, and they learned to discover those opportunities and then deliver on those opportunities. And that's a big part of entrepreneurship. The other part was they also invested in the skills and the human capital of people so that they could deliver on those opportunities. That's entrepreneurship. Not quite the Silicon Valley model, but it's a kind of a German variant, German rendition of it.
Yeah, thanks, and thank you for walking us through that to tease out the German variant of it. I appreciate that. So though the German economy has been growing steadily, income inequality and poverty have also increased in some areas. Where in Germany is this most problematic, David, and what are the steps necessary to correct these problems?
In some ways it mirrors what we've seen in this country, in every country. You could argue, I think critics of Germany, typically elsewhere on the continent, would argue and say, yeah, Germany has sacrificed a type of solidarity that's essential in Europe, which is a closer, tighter income distribution, to a more American style approach, and the consequence is this same thing we feel in this country, this gap growing apart. You ask where it's the greatest. It's clearly the greatest between they call them the new states, or the old East German states, where the incomes are the lowest, unemployment tends to be the highest, and then the West. So you see that kind of between regions, clearly between the cities and the rural areas, but we can see within the cities too, the gap is growing and growing and growing. And of course between the educated, the people with the skills, and the uneducated, just like we see in this country. And it's clear it's a growing problem that I think in the solution, in fact, in a way, it mirrors the same thing this country went through by embracing entrepreneurship and innovation after our crisis in the 1970s. That's what led us out, but it also led to these disparities. Germany's confronting the same thing.
David, thank you so much for coming in to speak with us today. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. That's all we have for this edition of Cyber Focus. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any comments or suggestions for future topics, please let us know at CIBER, that's CIBER, @indiana.edu.